Alrighty, cherubs. So today we're going to be talking about Japan, and with Japan, we're going to end our tour of East and South Asia. All right. So we've got a couple videos to watch. The theme for today is harmony with nature. Look for how Japanese art tries to incorporate nature and live in harmony with it, and that's obviously going to be influenced by the culture and by the religions that are going on in Japan. Okay, so we've got several pieces happening today. We've got a meditation garden, we've got a temple, a scroll, a screen, and a woodblock print. Okay. Shinto and Zen are going to heavily influence how the art of Japan looks, so just keep that in the back of your mind. And know that Japan was separated from most, especially the West, longer than many other places. Okay, so it was very isolated for much of its history. That being said, when they finally come in contact with the West, they more than anyone else are going to radically change the art of Europe. Okay? They're like one of the single biggest influences in changing the trajectory of European art. And you're gonna find it in very, very dramatic ways. So I'm really excited to introduce this to you so that when we get to those things in Europe, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. So Japan's really going to heavily influence taking European art and making it what it becomes. Okay? So here's our timeline for Japan. Now, one of the things that you need to understand is Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is a meditative branch of Buddhism, and it's a monastic tradition, and it focuses heavily on mindfulness. So if you've heard of mindfulness, and if you've done mindfulness in any classes, it's rooted in Zen Buddhism, though it can be secular, and obviously if you're doing it in class, it is a secular approach. It's just being very aware of your surroundings, about what you're doing, about where your thoughts are, like constantly being aware of what you're doing. Not clearing your mind, but giving your mind something to focus on. Okay, go ahead and give this a watch. It'll help to clarify a little bit more about what Zen Buddhism is about. Okay, it comes obviously from Buddhism is gonna come from China, and again, it is austere. It is about living a very, very simple monastic life. And again, meditation is key. To obtain enlightenment, to obtain nirvana, you have to meditate. Yeah. And so Zen Buddhism is that kind of mindfulness is going to play into the art of Japan. Okay? So, for example, in architecture, what that means is that the structures are usually going to be made out of wood. They're going to be simpler structures. And they're going to harmonize because of that Zen influence, and with Shinto as well, harmonize with nature. They don't want to dominate the landscape. They want to live in harmony with the landscape. Okay? The interiors are going to open dramatically to the outdoors. They're going to open up and have these vistas so you can see the outside. They're going to use materials that are obviously found in nature to create these. The eaves are going to be broader and wider than you're going to see in China. So those sloping roofs are going to be bigger because they get more rain in Japan. All right. So they need a way to channel that away from the center of the building. Interiors of buildings they're going to be mobile, okay, which means they're going to be movable. They're going to have movable walls. They're not walls. The weight of the building is carried on the outside walls rather than the interior structure, so that they can move the walls. They're going to be screens, okay? You're also going to have Zen gardens. Okay, you're going to have places purposefully cultivated so that you can meditate there. They're going to have wet gardens and dry gardens. And the dry gardens are going to be, and you may have seen these they've become popular on people's desks. They're like a little tray of sand with a little rake. Okay, that is a really, really simplified version of what a Zen garden actually is. It's a large space filled with gravel, and you do rake the gravel with a rake, but you do it in specific patterns to mimic the oceans, to mimic the patterns in the sky, the clouds, and we're going to see that here in a second. Okay, so dry gardens, but then there's also wet gardens, which are gardens that you think of, with plants and such that have water, that have moving water, that allow you to focus on that. So the Zen garden is a place for spiritual refreshment. It's a place for refinement and a place to just sit and contemplate nature. So our first piece, okay, is going to be Todai-ji. It's a structure called Todai-ji, and here in Nara, is this structure. Now here, go ahead, again, there's a couple of videos dealing with this. Go ahead and give these a watch. The temple structures of Todai-ji in Nara. And here is I wanted to give you a tour of Todai-ji, but I couldn't find an actual one. So someone recreated it in Minecraft, which is kind of funny, but shockingly accurate. So go ahead and give this Minecraft tour of Todai-ji of a watch. Okay. So there are several structures here in the complex of Todai-ji, but this is the main Buddha hall. Now you can see it is quite large. Okay, we've got the sculptors Unkai and Kaikai that work on this building. Now check it out. Check out the date: 750 CE, rebuilt in 1700. It is the largest and the oldest wooden structure still extant. Okay. I mean, look at the giant eaves, and again, this is the exception rather than the rule, where this building is so incredibly massive. Okay, this bronze lantern is part of the original structure, going back all the way to 750 CE. It has burned down and been rebuilt a couple times in its history. This structure is coming from 1700. So again, it's a temple. It's a Buddhist temple. Okay, and inside it houses the largest bronze Buddha on the planet. Okay, so again, it comes from Nara, and it holds the Vairocana Buddha. Now, remember, Vairocana Buddha is the primordial Buddha. He's the Buddha that existed before the world existed. Okay, this is not Siddhartha Gautama. This is not the historical Buddha or ahistorical Buddha. This is a spiritual Buddha that existed before the world began. All right, so it has been decimated a couple times and has been rebuilt. So again, largest wood structure on the planet, and it's inspired by monumental Chinese architecture. That's the Great Buddha Hall of Todai-ji. Here, they also want you to see the gate. The gate structure mimics the structure of the temple with its 2-story double eaves, wood. Now, you think back to gates. Gates and doorways have become important, and we've seen several now throughout the history of art. We saw the Torana Gate at the Great Stupa at Sanchi. We've seen the portals at both Saint-Foy and the Chartres Cathedral. So, and we're going to see more. So gates and entrances become important in the history of art because they mark the entrance usually to a sacred space or to a special place. You saw the gates at the Forbidden City. Okay, not a sacred space, but a special space. So gates become important demarcations of mind shift. You're entering a new space, treated differently. Okay, so here within this, we've got our 3 open passages that you can pass through. Now within, now that it's quite wide, within, standing right here, you can see the tops right here are these giant wooden guardian statues, and they look fierce. Okay, so here is the gate into the temple complex. We've got these massive pillars, and it's meant to be impressive and stately and to demarcate that space. Okay. Oh yeah, the roof. So you can look up and see all the way to the top. There's no ceiling in here that you can look. When you walk underneath, you look through and up, and you can see the inside of the roof there. It's all open. Okay. Now here he is. Here's the Vairocana Buddha, the great Buddha statue that's housed within the main, the Great Buddha Hall. Now, again, he doesn't look, I mean, this could be, the photo here does not give you context as far as how massive he is. But you'll notice he is seated, okay, in a meditative position. He is seated in a lotus position. He's sitting enthroned on a lotus. He's got a giant mandorla surrounding him with other Buddhas within the mandorla. His hands are in mudra poses. Okay. Okay. There he is being cleaned. And I added this photo so you can get a sense of his scale. Okay, so this is the largest bronze Buddha in the world. Enormous. Just enormous. Okay? All right, so he does have those mudras. Don't fear and welcome. All right, so he was created when the emperor embraces Buddhism, and he's created to, well, for political gain, for political capital as well as spiritual capital. Now, inside the entrance gate, here are, on one side you've got the one guardian figure, and on the other you've got the other, the neo-guardian figures. And again, you can see their contrapposto stance, their extreme S-curve stance. They're very dramatic, very fierce-looking, trying to warn you, you're entering a sacred space. No shenanigans here, okay? Their musculature is exaggerated, obviously. I mean, you're getting like, it's unrealistic. I mean, they're almost to the point of being grotesquely exaggerated. They're so muscular, okay? And again, those very fierce faces with the flowing robes and the flowing elements here. So very, very dramatic, fierce, awe-inspiring. Okay, now these are wood statues. Yeah, they're just guardians. So again, we've seen guardian figures before. We've seen the Sphinx. We've seen the Lamassu. We've seen the terracotta warriors. And again, these are placed on the inside of that giant gate house to protect the Buddhas. Now, compare that to the guardian placed at the Longmen Cave. Okay? These ones, he seems a lot more stiff. I mean, he's massive and he's carved in stone. He's a giant high relief. If we come back here. So these ones feel a lot more natural. Their stance feels a lot more normal, natural. And there's a lot more movement involved. But that's because he's a relief sculpture. Okay? So that is the structure of Todai-ji, Great Buddha Hall, and its gate. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to shift to the structure of Ryoan-ji. Okay. And there's terms that you need to know. One of them is wabi sabi. All right. Wabi sabi means that you're going to appreciate the beauty in a less than perfect circumstance, that things have been done to demonstrate the impermanence or the imperfection of a moment. And you'll see that that comes from Sanjo Rikyu, who is going to codify the tea ceremony. So the concept of wabi-sabi is really, really important in the Japanese aesthetic, that things are beautiful, but they have very purposefully placed flaws. So you'll see here, for example, that a tea house will be constructed, and the servant will rake up all the leaves, and, like make it look pristine, like perfect. And then the master comes and knocks some of the leaves to have this little sprinkle of leaves back on the path, so that to incorporate wabi sabi. Okay. Or the idea of taking a piece of ceramics or anything and purposefully, when you make it, to make it slightly asymmetrical, slightly imperfect, so that you can appreciate it for its imperfection. And it comes back to the concept of the human soul, that the human soul is imperfect, and we appreciate us as we are. So that's the concept of wabi sabi. Go ahead and give this a watch. It's going to explain it a lot better than I just did. Okay. Now within, and Sanjo Rikyu, again, this is going to give us some more information about the guy who invents this concept, and he's going to be the one that also codifies the tea ceremony. Now I've included a clip from Samurai Jack. If you've ever seen that cartoon, it's an amazing cartoon. But I've included this clip where he performs a tea ceremony, the Japanese tea ceremony. And again, it's codified by Rikyu. And if you watch the Rikyu video and the other one, it'll explain like why they change it and what the origin of the tea ceremony is. And these are all important. The tea ceremony in Japan is a way to celebrate hospitality, of friendship. You perform it for someone that you love, an important guest. It's not something that you just do every afternoon, but it is a way to celebrate the people that you are drinking tea with. The movements, like I said, have been codified. That you do certain things in a certain order and in a certain way. You fold the fabric, you clean your instruments, you wash them very deliberately in these with so many movements, and then you put things down back in their place as you prepare the tea. And they show you, again, this is a really kind of quick version here in Samurai Jack, but it's a pretty good one where he's doing the movements, washing out the implements and preparing this tea for this guest. So go ahead and give those a watch. Now, the reason why this is important is because here in Ryoan-ji, Ryoan-ji is a Zen Buddhist temple. It's a meditation garden. Ryoan-ji, go ahead and give this guy a watch. Ryoan-ji has two parts. There's the wet garden, and then there's the dry garden. So this is a shot of this video thumbnail of the dry garden. We'll talk about that in a second. But the wet garden, again, it has this pond, has this little stream that runs through it, and has these trees that are purposefully placed to be beautiful. And you're meant to come here and contemplate nature and to walk through it. And here on the pond, there is a little tea house where the tea ceremony is performed, okay, so for guests coming to the monastery. And so you've got this lovely, lovely, beautiful space that you can wander through the paths and contemplate and meditate and your place in the universe, okay, within nature. And it's a remarkably refreshing experience. Now, there's no one place in all of Ryoan-ji where you can stand and look at the whole thing. It's purposefully designed so you cannot. You don't get any grand vistas, that you are lost in these little paths and meant to contemplate and wander and meditate without any grand views, okay? No grandiosity here. So here is the little tea house in the wet garden, so it's just on the pond. And you can see again how it's purposely obscured by the plants. And here's an inside shot. So again, everything is done very low and simple and to the floor. Again, nothing's really, with the exception of Todai-ji there, nothing's really massive in Japan, okay? You can see how they're using paper screens in the windows, and it overlooks this the water moving. Okay, and here you'd perform, or the tea ceremony would be performed. Okay, and it's meant to look arbitrary, like it happened by chance, like nature sprouted up here, and there's just this little tea house and these paths that just happened to be there. Okay, so it is asymmetrical, but it is actually very, very highly organized and very purposefully placed according to the concept of wabi-sabi. So go ahead and give, again, those videos a watch. And the water becomes important because water is always important for purification. Now the dry gardens, here we go, the dry gardens are a place to meditate still, but what you're meant to do here, and this is still part of the complex of Ryoan-ji, is you're supposed to come and rake the gravel. And as you do it, you're doing it with mindfulness. You're listening, you're focusing to the sounds, you're focusing on the patterns that you're making, and you're trying to do it without leaving your footprints in the gravel so as to not make any indentations. And you want the perfect indentations and rows in the gravel without footprints. Okay, so you got to make sure to do it in such a way so as to cover up your footprints. Now, it's meant to resemble the waves of the ocean, and then the rocks within become islands, a symbolic representation of islands in the ocean. Alternatively, they also become, as they rake the gravel differently, they become swirling clouds, mist, and the rock sections become the very peaks of mountains peeking out and looking at the, over the tops of the clouds. Okay. And so you're meant to, again, come here, meditate, focus on the sound, focus on the pattern. And as you do so, try to gain enlightenment. A bit of popular culture with the idea of the Zen garden. Okay. That's Dr. James Fox. He is an art historian visiting the gardens at Ryoan-ji. Okay. So these are the gardens of Ryoan-ji. And here's kind of an overview of what we're looking at the site, the entrance, the pond, and some of the other structures that are here. Okay. So that's Ryoan-ji. Scroll painting also becomes important. It's important in Asia, starting in starting in China, and then migrating, of course, to other parts of Asia. You can see, so what this video is just about scroll painting. Go ahead and give it a watch. Okay, but this one's going to talk to us about the scroll that we're looking at. And the scroll that we're looking at is called The Night Attack on the Sanjo Palace. And what this is, again, go ahead and give that a watch. Oops, come on. Here we go. Okay. It's from the Kamakura period. And what is being depicted here is the events of a civil war in which the rebels come and attack the palace. they rebel against the government. And here is the far left end of the scroll. So what happens is you take this scroll in your hand and you start at the right side because you read right to left. And you're going to start with the right-hand side and you're going to turn it. And as you're turning it, so you're only holding, it's massive. It's massive, massive scroll. But you're turning it and looking at it. You're only seeing like this much of it at one given time. So what you're doing, it's almost like a little movie, like a little flip book, where you're moving across the scene as you go from right to left. You're moving across the scene, but then you're like so physically you're moving and you're seeing like the palace and the progression of the soldiers through the palace and then out. Yes, so you're physically moving through the space, but then you're also like moving through time, like you're watching the soldiers and it's supposed to be like a movement through time as well. So almost like a little movie where you're progressing through until you get to the very, very end. Okay, and it ends with this single bowman out in front of the horsemen. Okay, out in front of the army. Now, you're going to see that the attackers have been depicted as not human, that they're very animalistic. They've been given animal-like qualities, and that the people loyal to the emperor are still going to be depicted as human. Okay, though everyone is very simplified and abstracted. Now, this is done in an isometric projection, and we've talked about this briefly before, but that didn't really explain. So what this video is kind of breaking down what an isometric projection is. And it's like the first couple minutes of this clip. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but it's just breaking down what an isometric projection is. And you're familiar with an isometric projection through video games, okay? That they use this projection in video games as a way to, so you have this kind of tilted up perspective. You're like, the viewpoint is you're not viewing it from here, on a flat plane on the ground. You're viewing it back and up from above, and nothing recedes to a vanishing point. Okay, so if I extend these lines out here in this isometric projection forever, they're never going to touch. Whereas if I do that in a Renaissance style painting with the linear perspective, it appears like they would touch. So that's the difference. And that's the projection that's being used here. Okay, that's very Asian. That's very Asian aesthetic, which truthfully might be why it gets incorporated into video games. Okay, so go ahead and if you click here, well, we're going to find this and re-update the link so you can explore the scroll. Okay, so it depicts the Civil War in 1159. And again, it has these strong diagonals and this strong brushwork, and it's going to be painted 100 years after the Civil War, right? You see the emperor. They're trying to capture the emperor. Okay, you see the coup. You see the emperor being taken prisoner and the palace in flames. The emperor being whisked away in this wooden cart. They are going to kill the opposition, the people loyal to the emperor, and put their heads on sticks and, parade them around. It's really, really violent. But it's very swift. It's very quick in its movements. The color scheme has been muted, so you really like the flames are the things, the reds are the things that stand out. Yeah, it's really, really powerful. Okay. So our second to last piece, second to last piece, we've got the white and red plum blossoms by Ogata Koren. Okay. Now this is a screen, and if we move ahead, so you can see it's actually a pair of screens where we've got this stream depicted. And on the right side, you've got red plum blossoms. And on the left side, you've got these white plum blossoms in this trees. So you can see how what the artist has done, they've given the background a background of gold. Okay. And with the stream has been flattened. The space has been flattened completely. So you're getting this stream, but the water doesn't look any further away up top than it does down here. And the branches of the trees all look compressed so that there's no sense really of depth. But the screen itself here is modeled. They're using a watercolor. Okay, so this is on paper, and I'm going to click this so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, you can see how they're doing the watercolor on top of the gold leaf, which, if you've ever tried anything like that, painting on something that's not quite paper, watercolors, you're going to get this kind of marbly effect that they've achieved here, which is kind of cool. So go ahead and scan around here. So you can see again the swirliness of the water and the modeled marbly effect of the painting of the trees. So this look, this flatness with these geometric and organic patternings, this is really, really, really going to influence Europe. The Europeans are going to get a hold of this aesthetic later on in the 19th century, and they're going to go crazy for it. They're just going to love this and start to copy and start to like devour everything Japanese that they can get their hands on, and they're going to copy it. Sometimes literally just copy it and then start to incorporate the aesthetic later into their works. So this becomes very, very important. So this work by Ogata Korin becomes super duper important for Europe. And we'll talk about pieces and artists that is very, very specifically inspired by this piece by Ogata Korin. Okay. So moving on. So it's a room divider. It's a screen divider. That's all it is. But it is, again, depicting these things. Nature. Okay. Now, our last piece is coming to us, and what it is a woodblock print. What they're going to do is they're going to take wood blocks and carve into them. So each color receives only one wood block. So this print, for example, is going to have one, the stripes are another block, 2, 3, 4, the red would all be 1, 5, the green is 1, 6, 7, the gold. This would be probably 15 to 20 wood blocks to create this picture where the scene is carved into the wood, where the different sections are carved into the wood, cut away, and then inked, and then pressed onto paper. Okay, and woodblock printing becomes very, very important in Japan. They're going to show domestic scenes. They're going to show, again, scenes of nature, billowing drapery. But you can see here the isometric projection here in this particular print. Okay, this is really how Japanese art is going to travel initially to the West, because they're going to export goods and need packing paper. And these prints are going to be so ubiquitous that they're going to just wrap, the things in these prints because they're just everywhere. It's just like junk almost. So they're going to wrap the goods, the porcelain or whatever they're exporting, in these prints. And the Europeans, when they get them, they're like, oh, good, I got my vase that I wanted, but oh, look at this wrapping paper. It's like if you've ever gotten something from mailed to you with a newspaper that was wrapped in newspaper from another place. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And you kind of like pull out the newspaper and look at it. I don't know if you've ever done that. I know I have. Or if it's done especially with a foreign newspaper, you're like, oh, wow, that's really neat. That's what happened, and that's how they started to get the look of Japanese art introduced into Europe. Now, the piece that we're going to look at is Hokusai Under the Great Wave. So go ahead and give him a watch. So this is the piece. This is one of the pieces that you walked into this classroom knowing. So the artist's name is Hokusai, and we're going to call it the Great Wave, but that's the moniker. It's the Great Wave off of Kanagawa from the 36 Views of the Mount Fuji series. Please just call it the Great Wave, okay, so as to not hurt yourself trying to write all that out. What you're seeing here is, again, it's part of a series that shows Mount Fuji. So what we're seeing here are these sailors in Tokyo Harbor, okay, that are coming in. They're just short distance, jetting across the little bay there, but this storm has arisen, and with this giant wave that's about to, and it looks like it's going to consume them. So we can see the tradition of, again, harmony with nature. Like, how do you fight nature? You don't. And if you notice that they're all just laying it down, like, not trying to, like, you don't see them scrambling about, okay? So this relates very nicely back to Fan Kuan's Travelers Among Mountains. You see the smallness of humans next to the bigness of nature, okay? The wave itself looks like it's going to, it's almost personified here, how it's almost like monstrous. And this picture resonates with us for a lot of different reasons, and we're going to talk about that here in a sec. So we've got this seascape. Mount Fuji, again, is the sacred mountain of Japan, and it almost looks like another one of the waves here. All right. Again, it personifies nature. We've got this areas of negative space that contrast with the water. So why do you know this picture, and why is this picture so successful? This is one of the 2 emojis on your phone that is based on an actual work of art, okay? This is one of them. So it's a very, very successful image, but why? Okay. It follows the rule of thirds very perfectly. Bam, where you split the canvas into thirds, and boom. The interesting points are at those intersections. So you get Mount Fuji, and you get the center of that wave crest, okay? And it's very clearly following that rule of thirds. Perfect, okay? So compositionally, interesting. It's also using the golden section. Hokusai. Now, I told you that this was a universal thing, okay? That the golden section is not just Greek, it's universal. And we are attuned to love its beauty. Waves actually do trough to the golden section. They trough at a ratio of 1 to 1.618 when they form, always, all over the planet. So when you see this, Hokusai, you can tell, was a great and astute observer of nature, because he very clearly recreates that ratio here. So we see this as lovely and dramatic because it's a golden ratio. It also creates a yin-yang. Okay, so you see the positive space, the wave, but it swirls and intersects with this negative space of the sky. So this positive, and it swirls around, and it makes this yin-yang. And so, again, very, very interesting to our eyes. And we love this swirling interaction. Now, if you've seen this picture, which is also on our list, you can see how they're essentially the same picture, okay, with the swirl. Okay, and this is Starry Night is as successful for the exact same reasons that Hokusai is with the Great Wave, that it becomes, I mean, it has the exact same elements, the rule of thirds, the golden section, the yin yang. It becomes, it is the very, spiritual cousin of this piece. They're cousins. They're related. Okay. Van Gogh himself is going to be an astute observer of Japanese prints. And so he very much takes the lesson of Japanese art to heart. Whether or not he actually saw the Great Wave, I don't know. But he does take the lessons of Japanese art to heart, which is why he incorporates the look into his pieces as well. Now, one more thing I wanted to say. So again, this is a wood block print. So this is going to be made with so many different wood blocks to get each color is its own wood block. And the reason why you do a wood block print rather than just paint it is that you can make many copies. Ha! So you can take this and reproduce it ad nauseum, because the wood blocks aren't going to wear out in your lifetime from just adding ink to them and pressing them on paper. So you could make literally hundreds or thousands of copies of this thing. So it's distributable, affordable art, which is why those prints become ubiquitous in Japan. They go everywhere because they're cheap. And that was the point. Okay. So these are our pieces. This is Japan. Okay. There's a really, really brief tour through it. So go ahead, give those videos a watch, check your pieces, check your notes, make sure you've got all the notes, make sure you've added on to them. Okay. This is it for East and South Asia. So what we're going to do is we'll have a test. We'll assign that. I'll open up the test here in a bit, and then we will take it, and it's going on this quarter's term. This term's grade. There we go.